Hello there, and welcome to another round of MTGA Tasting Notes. Today, we are getting into a new release of ours for the fall of 2025, and this is our 2022 Napa Valley Merlot. Something that we have talked a lot about, just the vintage 2022 over the last few years, because it was arguably the most challenging we've had recently. Now, the only reason it was challenging because the growing season was going beautifully up until September. And all of a sudden we had this big old heat spike on its way here. And we're talking north of 110 degrees for about 7 days straight. Still hot on either side of that, as you might imagine. And we as winemakers and vineyard managers and everyone out here had a lot of very, let's say, stressful business decisions to make regarding harvest, what we're going to do we have enough water to take care of the vines through this immense heat wave? What's the fruit going to look like before, during, or after all this? There are a lot of unanswered questions going into it. For those of us that were on a relatively even keel, our wells weren't dry, the reservoirs still had water in them, we were looking pretty good, we were able to sit through this heat. And the reason that we did that is because the fruit just wasn't ready yet. It still tasted green, it was still edgy, it just wasn't ripe. We weren't going to get the characteristics that are typical of our wines. So we had two options. One was harvest before, when the fruit's clearly not ready, and make mediocre wine, or wait and try to make the best wine you can. So we relied on the latter. And waiting through that heat spike plus another week to let the vines kind of uptake some more water, settle back down into a groove, everything shook out really, really well for us. Now, the wines, as you might expect, given a really hot, time period during harvest in particular, the wines are a little bit more intense, they're a little richer, they're a little rounder, the alcohol contents can be a little higher in some situations because the sugar levels spike up a little bit. But the main thing we were looking for was just the flavor. Does it taste yummy? Plain and simple. And that's the point that we needed to get to before we could pick these grapes. Now, there's a little kind of, I guess, maybe secret. That's not such a secret, but some of you may know this, is that, the sugar level in our grapes is how many people kind of measure when grapes are ready. The reality is that it's much more complicated than that. Sugar level is just one factor in a bunch of different factors that you can measure, taste, smell. There's all kinds of things that you can rely on for when you think your fruit is going to be ready to be picked and start the winemaking process. For us, the sugar level's not irrelevant, but it's one of the last things I look at. I'd rather look at the acidity level or the pH. That's a big factor for me. I'd rather taste the grapes, chew on the seeds, chew on the skins, and see what this fruit actually tastes like. I'd like to crush up a lot of these grapes and taste the juice, and what does that actually taste like? And are we getting to a point where I think these grapes are truly physiologically ripe, or is it just high sugar content with no flavor, right? So we don't want to make that kind of watered down or green, lackluster red wine. That's not what we want to do. We want some of that richness. We want some of those beautiful plush fruit characteristics that Merlot does so well. So waiting through that heat wave, letting the vines settle down a little bit more, even though after a few short weeks they were already kind of shutting down, getting ready for hibernation, it was long enough to get this Merlot exactly where we wanted it to be. So despite the challenges of 2022 and kind of the tough decisions that we had to make through that harvest season to make sure we're going to make the best wine we possibly can, we got to some pretty solid end results. And quite frankly, those are the years, as annoying as they are in the moment, I love thinking about them after the fact because, one, the proof's in the pudding. Can you actually make a good wine in a challenging year? But two, it teaches you something. You learn something from the years, how to adapt, overcome things that maybe you hadn't before. And it had been some time since we had seen a really rough heat wave really impact harvest in that way. So it was a great learning experience on top of all that. Now, the wine, when you smell it, is very characteristic of our Merlot, which kind of leans more of those dark red fruit kind of characteristics. Maybe like your black cherry kind of characteristics here. It's not really those dark, really ripe fruits. Maybe it kind of bleeds into that like fresh fig kind of thing. There's a little bit more richness in this because of that heat wave, but not so much that it's flabby, right? There's still this really nice kind of structural edge to it. that is very typical of our Merlot, specifically with the acid profile and a little bit of the phenolic or the tannin content in there as well. Now when you taste it, the tannins are certainly more prevalent in this vintage. It's a little rougher, like right up front, right here. You can certainly feel the acid still tingle, but it's not as much of the defining characteristic as it has been in the past. I will say there is that really kind of rich, almost chocolatey note in this wine. I think very much a product of our barrel aging program during this year. We tended to use a little bit more new oak on average and changed up our barrel selection ever so slightly to really cater to this year and make sure that it was still kind of consistent with what prior years had offered. Now, as with every vintage, there are going to be these kind of subtle differences that we talk about. This difference is certainly going to be that richness, kind of that chocolatey note, a little bit more of those riper fruit characteristics, but still has enough structure and backbone to be like, oh, okay, like this still has like that great reach out and grab you kind of characteristic to it. I think that's the kind of stuff that you can hope for in a vintage like this, where you're gonna have these bigger, richer characteristics. The thing you want to have is enough structure to give it a backbone. Because there's like flabby wine that doesn't have that X factor there, just they fall apart so quickly. And when you have even big ripe years like this, when you have enough acidity, when you have enough tannin structure and the phenolics are there, you end up with still that really great, yummy wine that you would expect from any producer that tries to make something in a more restrained style like we do. The warmer vintages are definitely kind of our tougher ones. The colder years I love because we can slow play it a lot more and it really leans into the style of wine that I want to make. The warmer years like this are certainly the more challenging ones for us personally. But I think, given what the vineyards are doing, what we are able to manage during that heat wave, and of course getting the wines here to the winery and actually starting to make them, we ended up in a really, really great spot. This is a wine that is going to be a standout, especially from a challenging year. And there's going to be a lot of folks that made some pretty serious wine from a challenging year. It's certainly one of those vintages where you separate the men from the boys, girls from the women kind of vibe. And those that really know what they are doing and can stay on top of it really make some pretty killer stuff, all said and done. So I hope that this is a wine that you get to try here soon. For those of you in our wine club, we're going to be releasing this in the fall of 2025. This will become available to the rest of the mailing list and everybody else on our website and beyond in early 2026. Thank you all so much for checking out this here video. Be sure to check out some of our other tasting notes on any of the other wines that we produced, including some of our older vintages. You can also follow us on all of our social networks. That's here on YouTube, Instagram, the Book of Face, the social network formerly known as Twitter, for more regular updates about our harvest operations, about what we have going on here in the cellar, and events that we're doing around the country with some of our best friends, fans, and whatnot. As we get into the fall season. Be sure to check out our website, mtgawines.com, and you can also check out our podcast, the Wind Up Podcast, which there is a link for down in the description of this video. Have a great rest of your day, week, evening, morning, whatever the case may be, and we will see you here again soon for another round of Tasting Notes. Cheers.